Nice music. Nice buggy music playback because I accidentally have it playing twice. Where is it playing twice? Oh my gosh. Okay, we're gonna close the whole browser. And then we're going to... Nice music. Nice
I knew I would mess it up somehow on my first run through, but I had no idea that this would be how.
Okay, Alright, let's see if it's still streaming. Alright, here we go. Let's try it again, guys. Here we go. Let's play the song from the beginning here. Why is this not showing up in my channel? Oh, hey there. Hello. Class analysis. Can I refer to you as your real name? Is that fine? Okay, cool. Yeah, I believe that's Ryan then. So yeah, we're just getting set up here. I'm waiting a little bit because I know how streams are. And hopefully we'll get a few people in here. Wonder if I can use an external device to look at the stream here. Ay, ay. All right, that's enough of that. All right, let's get my face here. Hello. Hello there. You see my webcam literally straight out of 2012 maybe or so. But I'm visible. I know that I'm highly audible. I redid my audio stack. So who is all here, guys? Who is all here? Who here is a fan of Caleb Maupin? Who here is a fan of infrared? I want to know. And I doubt there's anybody here that doesn't watch or know about either of them. But my goal would be to get an audience of people who are not simply fans of infrared and Caleb Maupin, who are looking for, a bit more from side piece bismuth kind of, you know what I mean? So, I have to figure out how I'm going to do that. And I think I can do it. I think I'm very unique. I have a lot more value to me than simply agreeing with those two guys. Yeah, and I'm gonna try to demonstrate that today. I believe in doing things in a radio-like style. I believe in doing things in a professional, radio-like style. I believe in a constant stream of high-quality information, and then it's over. No waiting around. Just get to the point And for this reason, I have scripted out the first part of my stream. If I get enough audience engagement, I will definitely continue the stream for the sake of my audience. But if I do not get enough audience engagement, then I will simply turn off the stream after I'm done with my whole thing. All of the content that I've made until now has been leading up to me feeling confident enough in my skills to create a stream. And with that, I am going to begin the content. So, I wanted to start off today with some news. Okay, so this is Janet Yellen. She is the chair of the Federal Reserve. Now, if you're living in America right now, you already know what's going on with the economy. You don't need someone else to tell you that gas prices are insane, that inflation is completely insane and unacceptable, right? So this job of Janet Yellen is to pretend that everything is under control and to get you to accept the conditions that have been laid out for you by the U.S. establishment, and the fact that they cannot seem to pivot from their imperialist strategy, which we have had more or less since the founding of our country, but especially since the end of World War II. Folks, this strategy will change. We will not be able to continue this strategy. And Janet Yellen is going to explain why everything's great and you should just chill out and accept how things are. So,
Madam Secretary, thanks for joining us this morning. You know, the Wall Street Journal reported this morning that 44% of economists expect a recession in the next year.
Now, immediately, this is hilarious to me. 44% of economists expect a recession in the next year. If you asked me if I expect a recession in the next year, I would say I expect one now. So to me, that's not even a yes or no question. There is a recession. We're in it. And so already this is a loaded question, putting reality in the negative.
Is that what you expect as well?
Well, I expect the economy to slow. It's been growing at a very rapid rate as the labor market is recovered and we have reached full employment. It's natural now that we expect a transition to steady and stable growth.
It's really funny that they use the term full employment to refer to having what's our unemployment rate at around maybe 5% or so. This is what they call full employment because capitalism necessitates the reserve army of labor. It necessitates there be a base of unemployed people. And so full employment is when unemployment is just low enough. And hello there, Ware Pilgrim. It is good to see you here. Continuing on.
But I don't think a recession is at all inevitable. Chair Powell, clearly inflation is unacceptably high. It's President Biden's top priority.
She's referring to Jerome Powell. Ah, yes, I appeared on the Culture.tv, and I plan to appear there again. I think that I improved their ratings, not to toot my own horn, but I think that I would love to appear there again.
To bring it down. And Chair Powell has said that his goal is to bring inflation down while maintaining a strong labor market. That's going to take skill and luck, but I believe it's possible.
So, I mean, this is what she's saying. No, it's not possible to bring inflation down while maintaining a strong labor market, because this is the mechanism of the Federal Reserve that you should all understand. This is how they self-describe, is that they set the rate at which banks and companies that they loan to have to repay their loans, right? They put pressure on them to repay their loans by setting the interest rate at a certain level. And when they set it higher, then they have to pay them back. They can hire less people, so the labor market gets worse. And when they set it lower, they can hire more people, but inflation gets worse. So the Federal Reserve's mechanism is a bit like the rudder on a plane that's crashing. We can crash one way or we can crash another way. And she's the one steering this plane with no more gas in it that's crashing. And she's the one that's trying to tell us, oh, well, you know, we can crash here and not there. You know, we can ruin our labor market rather than ruining consumer prices. Well, either way, it's the same thing. Either way.
I don't think a recession is inevitable.
You say it's not inevitable. I guess the question is it likely? We're already seeing consumers start to pull back on services, especially. Some signs that the job market may be slowing as well.
Well, I think consumer spending remains very strong. There's month-to-month volatility, but overall spending is strong, although patterns of spending are changing, and higher food and energy prices are certainly affecting consumers and making them change their patterns of spending. But bank balances are high. It's clear that most consumers, even lower income households, continue to have buffer stocks of savings that will enable them to maintain spending.
Households are using up what little savings they have. And Janet Yellen wants to tell us, well, it's okay because they can afford things now. Okay, Janet, what happens when they can't afford things anymore? Okay. Oh, it's okay. They have a little bit of buffer savings. The average household savings was, last time I checked, around $600. And this is getting used up because of inflation. And wages are not keeping up with that inflation. And she's going, oh, well, it's okay for now. Yeah, for now. Yeah, for now. We're driving into a brick wall. But we haven't hit the wall yet, or maybe just the front of the car crushed, and the driver is still hasn't hit, anyway.
So I don't see a drop-off in consumer spending is a likely cause of a recession in the months ahead. And the labor market is very strong, arguably the strongest of the post-war period. Not only is the unemployment rate near historic lows, but there are 2 job vacancies in every unemployed worker.
Okay, so, consumer spending is strong, right? Well, by the numbers, consumer spending, I mean, people are cutting back, but the prices are higher. So, I mean, by the numbers, maybe it's pretty good. Maybe it's pretty strong, right? Hello there, Char darling. And War-E. I will try to remember that. War-E. Yellen's a felon. I would like to see, I would like to see that case made. Maybe you've got a case you can make there. Yeah, and this, we have all these job openings. Well, jobs aren't paying enough. So it doesn't matter if you have a job opening. If they're not offering a living wage, it's pointless, right? It's pointless. I could say I have an offer on my house if someone says they want to buy it for $1,000. Doesn't matter. If an employer says they want to hire labor at $8 an hour, that's not going to pay the rent, so nobody's going to care. I mean, like this, anyway.
So the labor market remains extremely strong. Unemployment insurance claims near their lowest levels in history.
It turns out that you and the president, maybe even the Fed, were too optimistic about inflation last year. Concerned that may be happening again with your suggestion that a recession is not inevitable?
Well, inflation is really unacceptably high.
So they use the phrase too optimistic about inflation. Well, I'll tell you this. In 2021, Janet Yellen said there would not be an inflation crisis. So you tell me if they were too optimistic about it.
The reason is Russia's war on Ukraine, his boosted energy and food prices in the United States and globally. It's important to recognize that the United States is certainly not the only advanced economy suffering from high inflation. We see it in UK, we see it in France, Germany, Italy, and the causes of it.
The whole Western world is suffering from inflation. The whole Western world. Keep this in mind. Western.
Our global, not local, supply chain snarls, partly resulting from lockdowns in China, are also boosting inflation. And so these factors are unlikely to diminish immediately.
So she wants to talk about, oh, it's China's fault for doing lockdowns. It's Russia's fault for attacking Ukraine, right? But why won't she talk about how, in response to Russia attacking Ukraine, we sanctioned the hell out of Russia, cut down trade a ton. And when you cut down trade between countries, that is going to matter a lot more than, yes, there is an increase in prices due to Ukraine being in a war rather than being an exporting country right now. They're in war mode, right? Sure, that's going to increase prices a little bit, but I think that a lot bigger deal here would be the fact that we sanctioned the hell out of Russia, which, by the way, did not stop them. It is not slowing them down. It's not working, right? If you wanted to slow them down, it's not succeeding. And all it's doing is damaging the American people. All it's doing is hurting us.
But over time, I certainly expect inflation to come down. And I think it's possible to have that happen in the context of a strong labor market.
So it's okay for inflation to come down in the context of a strong labor market. Again, let's read through this doublespeak. You know what she's saying is that because the labor market is strong, meaning that unemployment is at the lowest level that it could reasonably be at in a capitalist system, yada yada, we can allow that market to get worse without public dissent getting out of control. So that means unemployment is going to go up because they plan on raising the Fed Reserve interest rates. Unemployment is going to go up, and then this will cause inflation to go down somewhat. Who knows how much?
Well, you expect it to come down, but prices are going to go up before they go down, right? Again, most economists expect the inflation rate to move up to around 7% by the end of the year. Does that sound about right to you?
Well, we've had high inflation in the first half of this year, and that locks in.
Inflation down to 7% by the end of the year. Guys, we've been experiencing an average of about 7% inflation for a good long while now. We can actually view a chart of the inflation rate on tradingeconomics.com right here. We can see this is the inflation consumer price index. This does not account for all goods, but you can see that the inflation rate has gone up and up and up. And this crazy amount of inflation that we've been seeing, where the dollar store becomes the $1.20 store, right? Where the way that they do the prices of inflation, first of all, is already fake. They use special measures to reduce the amount of inflation reported. I mean, if we have the dollar store becoming the $1.20 store, to me, that's 20% inflation, not 8% inflation, right? So this whole thing, it's deceptive. It's very highly deceptive. If you want to calculate the inflation rate between two given time periods, there's a formula to do it, right? So I can anchor things in a certain year, say since, mid 2020, we can calculate the amount of inflation from then until halfway through 2022, right? So you can figure out and calculate what inflation has been between two specific time periods. Right now, we can see that in this most recent time period, since 2021, inflation has been absolutely exploding. And if it goes down to 7%, it's going to continue to explode. And I don't know when it's going to end. I don't know if it's going to end.
High inflation really for the entire year. But I do expect in the months ahead that the pace of inflation it's likely to come down, although remember there are so many uncertainties relating to global developments, and we're united with our allies in certainly wanting to take the steps necessary to address, to punish Russia for what it's doing in Ukraine, and there is some spillovers to us as well.
You say that inflation is a global problem, and it certainly is, but how do you explain the fact that Europe's core inflation last month was under 4% and the United States was at 6%?
So, energy prices spill over.
So energy prices spill over. Okay, what is this? The price of energy in Europe is skyrocketing because they cut off from Russia. It makes a lot of sense for Russia to sell oil and gas to Europe, considering they're right next to each other. But because of America's imperialist geopolitical aims, we cannot allow that to happen. So we're selling our oil and gas to Europe at a low rate, which is increasing the prices here, even though we have more than enough oil for our domestic economy. Increasingly lately, we have actually become an oil exporter, where before we were not an oil exporter. So we have more oil than we've ever had, but prices are still really high. And this is a very confusing, almost inexplicable thing that's going on until you understand that context.
Is really half of inflation, food and energy, and there is spillovers because energy is an important input into almost everything in the economy. It is true that we've had core inflation over and above that is too high, and the Fed will take steps to bring it down. And President Biden believes there are other things the administration can do to support what the Fed will do. He's had historic releases of oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve that, even though gas prices are high, they would be higher without those releases.
So we had emergency gas for like wartime or something like that, and we just released it. Right? We're using up our emergency reserves right now.
He stands ready to work and is encouraging producers of oil and refined products, gas, to work with him to increase supplies to bring gas prices, energy prices down.
So this is interesting. So first she says we need to increase supplies to bring prices down. But listen to what she's about to say.
And if Congress will work with him to enact some of the administration's programs, we can bring down other costs that are burdening households, like prescription drugs, health care costs, increase the supply of affordable housing.
So not just that, but I mean, if things are really strong right now, then why do we need subsidies for housing? Why do we need price controls? If things are strong right now, if there's no problem, why do we need these measures, right?
We clearly have a housing problem in the United States, and we need to address it by building more affordable housing.
We have enough housing.
The American Petroleum Institute is pushing back on the president's call for refiners to increase production. I want to share what their president, Mike Summers, said on Wednesday. Said the administration's misguided policy agenda shifting away from domestic oil and natural gas has compounded inflation. How do you respond to that?
Let's go back. I accidentally muted that.
Said on Wednesday, said the administration's misguided policy agenda shifting away from domestic oil and natural gas has compounded inflationary pressures, added headwinds to companies' daily efforts to meet growing energy needs while reducing emissions. How do you respond to that?
Well, I don't think that policies are responsible for what's happening in the oil market. Actually, consumption of gas and fuels are currently at lower levels than pre-pandemic. And what's happened is that production has gone down. Refinery capacity has declined in the...
So, what's going on here? What's going on? The refineries are not operating at capacity. Demand is down, but prices are high? Can we make sense of this situation? How do you make sense of it? I mean, I do think that one and the same with America's geopolitical drives against Russia, where, you know, the West is now having to sort of redistribute our oil. In addition to this, you also have the sort of cartel of oil companies, Western oil companies, driving this whole thing, who are profiting massively from things being cut off in this way. And this high pricing could actually be them artificially setting prices higher so that they have less cost of labor and commodity inputs, right? They can produce less gas, but make the same money, if not more money, than they were making before. They could be consolidating their profits in order to extract a sort of cartel monopoly rent, right? And a trust-busting president, or at least a president setting price controls, could solve this problem if that's the case.
The United States and oil production has declined. I think that producers were partly caught unaware by the strength of the recovery in the economy and weren't ready to meet the needs of the economy. High prices should induce them to increase supplies over time. And look, it's a medium-term matter. The way in which we can assure reasonable energy expenses for households is to move to renewables to address climate change.
So this is the green policy they have. How is moving to solar and wind going to solve our problems here? It's not. It simply isn't. I mean, if she was talking about maybe like, okay, we need nuclear power, you know, we need to put into place more efficient forms of power generation, right? So that we can rely less on oil. That would make sense to me, right? But while our prices are crazy right now, she's advocating for something that's only going to make our energy systems less efficient, which is to use alternative energy. And they're talking about the green agenda. The only reason they're talking about green right now is because they want you to think, oh, well, maybe it's okay that we're consuming less oil. Maybe it's okay that the prices are higher because we're going to save the planet, right? But this is not the place to be talking about that. When Americans are suffering, this is not the place to be talking about that. And we can transparently see that this raise in prices has nothing to do with any sort of morality about the planet or sustainability. Has absolutely nothing to do with it, because if it did, then they would be proposing some type of rational solution to actually solve that problem without causing Americans to suffer. No, they are taking a situation that they created where they shot America in the foot, they ruined the American economy, right? And now they are trying to justify their mismanagement of the economy with some sort of green talking points. And I don't buy it.
As a medium-term matter, that's the way to free us from geopolitical movements in oil prices.
How about the short term? Several in Congress are calling for a gas tax holiday as prices average around $5 a gallon. Is that on the table?
Okay, so that's all I'm going to play about of this video. That is all I'm going to play. And one thing I'm going to say is that she recognized the severity of America's current housing problem and advocated for housing subsidies. Well, guess what? I think that could solve the problem. But another thing that we could do is maybe to clear out the several trillion in real estate junk bonds, as they would call them, mortgage-backed securities, which are assets in the Federal Reserve, but they are actually, in actuality, real estate junk bonds as the result of crank speculation, which should have resulted in several real estate investors, large real estate investors, going bankrupt, but instead have resulted in the American people being unable to afford housing, which is inflating the price of housing insanely much. It's inflating our rents, and all of this money is going back to these banks, right? So that they don't have to go bankrupt over these securities that they sold to the state as interest rates rise. Right? Because as the interest rates rise, the banks and speculators suddenly become forced to pay back these securities which were bought by the state. But they can't. So they need to extract more and more rent. And they need to sell housing at a higher and higher value. Well, I don't think that this bubble is something sustainable at all. I think that real estate is going to pop eventually. And, I am not sure what's going to happen after that, but we shouldn't have allowed things to get this way in the first place. And in practice, inflation is an upward transfer of wealth. Right now, in practice, inflation is not, everybody's getting poorer. No. It is an upward transfer of wealth. It is a reallocation of economic resources towards the people that hold property, towards the stockholders, towards the banks, towards the monopolies. That is what inflation is. So, now that I've played this onion, this onion video, I call it because it stinks. I am now fully awake and fully attentive because it pisses me off. So let's read some slightly more interesting stuff here. Now I have a report here. This is from the Executive Intelligence Review of the Schiller Institute, talking about the actual state of the economy. Here we go. Recession hitting the United States. Signs of deepening recession are multiplying in the American economy. The Atlanta Federal Reserve Bank is now tracking a minus 1% contraction in the economy in the second quarter, though not willing to forecast this, nor is any bank economist so far. After the contraction in the first quarter was finally revised lower to 1.6% by the Commerce Department. The reason for Atlanta's Fed declining estimate is the same as in its releases over the past 6 weeks: a continuing fall in household consumption expenditures and a rapidly increasing drop in the pace of business capital investment. A survey in the mid-Atlantic area by the mid-sized regional Provident Bank of New Jersey, which found nearly all of the respondents cutting back their household consumption, was reported June 30th by Zero Hedge. More than 10% of the 600 respondents eliminated all non-essential purchases, and another 72% have made some specific cuts in their living expenses. The bank's report says while some consumers have cut back on some non-essential spending like dining out and unnecessary travel, others reported much more drastic changes such as skipping meals, conserving water, and eliminating meat from their diets. People are feeling an immense amount of financial pressure right now. Unfortunately, this is not surprising after the Labor Department reported earlier this month that the United States CPI, Consumer Price Index, hit a 40-year high in May. Take this in the context of March, April, and May Federal Reserve reports of credit card debt growing by 40 to 50 billion each month, or 5% per month. One of the things President Biden told big lies about in his June 16th inflation speech to the public. In response to these clear signs of recession, longer-term U.S. Treasury interest rates have started falling so rapidly over the past 10 days that if the Fed actually raises its rates by 0.75% in July and 0.5% in September, that federal funds rate, which is an overnight lending rate, may be higher than those for 5-year or 10-year Treasury notes. An extraordinary situation, which, by the way, when the short-term rates exceed the long-term rates, that is the number one signifier of a recession. It corresponds with every recession we've ever had. Right? Then, under the guiding incompetence of Wall Street financial policymaking, we would look for the return of easy money from the Fed and even higher inflation, which to me is unimaginable. Completely unimaginable. So, now from RT, actually, we have a very interesting angle on this whole situation. In the wake of Biden telling us to grin and bear it with inflation, this is what Jeff Bezos has to say. That's right, the CEO of Amazon actually has a disagreement with our president here. Bezos rips into Biden over inflation plea. The Amazon founder accused the U.S. president of failing to grasp basic economics. Now, I'm going to leave it to you to decide whether or not he is just stupid or if he knows better and he's just lying. Or maybe he's just repeating the dog food from the people that are advising him, right? And then you have to wonder if those people know what's going on. Or are those people lying, you know? I mean, you have to wonder what's going on here because, you know, things are clearly not getting better as they said they would. I mean, again, I'm going to repeat this because this is important. In 2021, Janet Yellen said that we would not have inflation, that there would be no inflation crisis. That was in 2021. So, here we go. After Joe Biden's plea to oil companies to slash gasoline prices, Jeff Bezos lambasted the U.S. president, saying that he's either misleading the public or lacks a basic understanding of how a market economy works. Ouch. Inflation is far too important a problem for the White House to keep making statements like this. It's either straight ahead misdirection or a deep misunderstanding of basic market dynamics, he tweeted on Sunday. Now, I want to give you a little reminder here that Jeff Bezos is currently dealing with more and more of his workers unionizing for better pay and better conditions. So Mr. Bezos sees this inflation crisis going on and he goes, guys, I'm not going to be able to make as much profit. My workers are going to start unionizing. They're going to start pushing against me. You got to do something about this, guys. You got to do something. The business magnate's comment was in response to the president's appeal to oil companies that run gas stations in the U.S. On Saturday, Biden urged them to, quote, bring down the price that they charge Americans at the pump as soon as possible, saying this is a time of war and global peril. Bezos was not the only one to castigate Biden for his latest remarks on U.S. energy security. On Saturday, Douglas Carswell, CEO of the Mississippi Center for Public Policy, tweeted, bizarre, tragic, and pathetic, a U.S. president lashing out at gas hoarders. Bezos and the White House have sparred over the economy before, with the Biden administration criticizing the Amazon founder for opposing the president's planned reforms imposing higher taxes on wealthy U.S. citizens. And in mid-May, Bezos lashed out at Washington for injecting more, quote, stimulus into an already overheated inflationary economy. Well, that stimulus is the only thing keeping our economy afloat. That's what Bezos doesn't realize. Without the stimulus coming in, our economy would have crashed in 2020 right at the start of COVID. But Trump allowed literally unlimited QE, literally unlimited assets to be bought by monopolies from the state and banks from the state for future money. Yeah, we'll pay it back. No problem. We'll pay it back, right? These companies, these banks and monopolies, they're acting like your friend, or maybe former friend, who's always asking for money, right? They're always asking for money. I just need a bit more. No, I'll pay it back later. They never pay it back. And they never pay it back because it goes straight towards more luxuries for them, or it goes maybe towards living expenses. This is money that keeps things working in their own system. Their own system, their own way of being is based on parasitizing and exploiting others. And there's no other way for them to exist. Right? So, the U.S. president pinned the blame for high prices and inflation on Russia's military offensive in Ukraine, calling it Putin's price hike. According to a Rasmussen poll published in June, only 11% of Americans believe this to be the case. Good on you guys! With more than a half of respondents pointing the finger at Biden. Biden's conservative critics have blamed his administration's aggressive spending for driving inflation upwards and his anti-fossil fuel policies, including bans on new drilling leases and a shutdown of the Canada-US Keystone XL pipeline during his first week in office for raising fuel costs. And Biden has embargoed Russian oil and gas imports, which accounted for a small share of the U.S. imports. So guys, I don't even need to tell you that this is not Putin's price hike. I do not even need to tell you. And with that, I am going to take a short break, and I will be right back in a few minutes. All right. I am returning, and I hear fireworks outside. It's the 3rd of July, but because it is a Sunday, many fireworks shows are going on right now. Cannot blame you if you want to be at one of those instead of seeing the fireworks here. But nonetheless, this is the best schedule for me to stream. So I will be doing this next week if all things are well. So, I hope that if you see this stream now, maybe you're watching it in the future, rather than live. And you know that I will be streaming on Thursday evenings at 8:30 Central Standard Time and Sunday evenings at 8:30 Central Standard Time. That is right after I get off work. I find that this is a great way for me to maybe get some of my energy out after a day of work thinking about how I'm going to present my stream. So hopefully that is going to work out well for me. All right. Now, I wanted to pivot the topic a little bit here because I think that there's something very interesting going on, which I wanted to highlight. As was stated by Janet Yellen, America is not the only country which is suffering from inflation. It is not. And actually, I thought this was pretty interesting. The risk of deadly gas blasts are rising as cash-strapped UK homeowners skip their safety checks. So, folks, it's not just America that's suffering. In Britain, they actually are skipping paying their inspection fees, which is causing them to actually put themselves at risk of exploding. Right? Now, I think this is really funny to me because why do you have to pay for your own inspection? Guys, like, this should be mandatory. I mean, oh my gosh. What kind of a crazy system do you have where you have to pay for your own inspections, right? Oh, well, I guess, I wanted to save a little money and increase the chance that I could blow up and die. Right? I mean, are you kidding me? Anyway, and the fee is not even that high. So I'm going to go into this article here. Right? So the Health and Safety Executive Body, look, a boiler service costs about 80 pounds, okay, pounds to US dollars. It's only a little bit more than that. While a gas safety check for 3 appliances costs about 60 pounds. So you can imagine this is $100 or $200 that they're saving by skipping these checks. Only $100 or $200 that they are saving. And these explosions do happen. Here we go. Over the past 5 years, there have been 12 fatalities and 179 injuries caused by gas explosions and fires over the past 5 years. Folks, inspect your gas equipment. Don't get blown up. And just like in America, I think that this is the savings, people's savings are dwindling. They're using up that little bit that they were holding just in case things go south. Well, now they're going south and they don't want that to get used up faster by paying for safety checks. People are in emergency mode. They're thinking in the short term and they're not thinking about their own safety because they're thinking about, well, am I going to be able to afford food in 6 months, right? What am I going to do when I don't have any more savings, right? That's how people are thinking. And they're willing to risk getting blown up just to prevent that from happening. So this is telling stories about people that have gotten blown up, corroded or cracked mains pipes can leak gas into the ground, find its way under houses, into walls, gas explosions, as it is. And I also thought that another thing I would like to point out here is that it is not just gas checks that the Brits are skipping. People are not just laying down and doing, this sort of suicidal approach to their own economic livelihood. Actually, very far from it. And the RMT, Rail Workers Union, had the largest strike in 30 years with over 40,000 people asking for pay raises to compensate for inflation, as well as better job security guarantees. I mean, when you still have unions, now's the time to strike. In America, we don't have unions, right? So maybe we got to figure out, but we should take inspiration from these British rail workers who are on strike so that they can afford food. They were working long days, bad conditions, right? Their labor had to compete with workers that were not unionized. They had maintenance workers who were not unionized that were competing for their labor from a private contractor, And this strike, 40,000 people. Ware says the leader of the union is a sight to behold. Maybe next stream, I should go find him speaking and go show off some of these strikes. But I just wanted to mention this labor strike in the context of what is going on here with inflation and how I think that people should be reacting to inflation. So this strike began on June 22nd. And it's still going on today, which means it has been going on for 11 days, and they still haven't had their demands met. The scab labor of the managers and contractors trying to operate the rails are insufficient for running the rail system in the UK. So the UK has been effectively shut down by these rail workers striking. The UK has effectively been shut down for 11 days, and it is continuing. It is continuing. I also thought that a very interesting thing, which was pointed out by this rail union, is the amount of money that comes from dividends for leasing out these rail cars. I thought this was very interesting. Here we have this diagram showing the companies that lease out rail cars pulling 220 million pounds, which by the way is bigger in US dollars, 220 million pounds of dividends from leasing out these rail cars. And if the workers union is striking 40,000 strong, I mean, do the math here, right? That's a lot of money for each individual. In fact, let's do the math. Ready? We got 220 million, right? So 220 million, right? Divided by 40,000, right? That's $5,500, right? Or 5,500 pounds rather in this case. Ooh, secret future stream content. Anyway, so that's $5,500 that they made over this 5-year period. Well, or 5,500 pounds they made over this 5-year period, right? So, I mean, this is $1,000 or 1,000 pounds, maybe 1,500 pounds a year that could be going towards the workers. And I think that would make a really big difference in people's lives, considering that they're passing up inspections that only cost, maybe 150 pounds, right? I think that would make a pretty big difference for these workers. So they have diagrams, and I love these things. Stop the profiteering, start investing in rail, cut their profits, not services and jobs. I think that is really good, political agitation there. And we need to remember, I think that there's kind of a blind spot right now in a lot of politics. People say they're Marxist, but why aren't they talking about exploitation, right? This is an example of exploitation where the profits of the workers, the value generated by workers, is being consolidated by the people on top. And this happens everywhere. This is capitalism. That is one of the basic facts of capitalism, which I really see people neglecting. And it surprises me a lot. Some people would say this is a bourgeois deviation from the correct view, which is, to see the extraction of labor value in this way, right? So I think that these types of strikes, this is only the beginning because, again, we don't know when inflation is going down. I don't see any reason why inflation is going to go down. So I think that things are going to continue to get worse for the West, for America and Europe. I think that more and more strikes are going to erupt. They're going to get more severe. There are other industries in Britain that are starting to strike already, inspired by the RMT strike, right? And I just want to remind you that inflation is a consolidation of wealth. It is a reallocation of money from the people towards a small minority of owners. I want to remind you of that. And profits are soaring, wages are stagnating. We have stagflation. People are getting poorer despite working more, despite the constant advance of technology. Why is it that our living standards are about the same as they were in the 70s when we have so much better technology? Why are we still working 8 hours a day? Our jobs are becoming highly non-productive. Our ancestors worked harder than we did building this society, and they never got to see the fruits of their own labor delivered to them. And now, as a result, their children have to work meaningless jobs while an increasingly automated economy keeps us in cycles of pointless labor. Pointless labor. We could all be working 3 or 4 hours on highly skilled jobs every day for 4 or 5 days a week. We could be working a very, very small amount. And we would be running the economy just as well as it runs now. Certain professions require more or less hours, but we could be working so much less and having so much better conditions with the advance of technology, which we simply have not seen. And this is another fact of capitalism that I really want to hear people talking about. I really want to hear people explicitly pointing out the fact that capitalism is holding back the advance of technology. And what dwindling piece of the cake that we do have as workers is premised on American imperialism, which is failing. So since the end of World War II, America has dictated the conditions of global trade. We have toppled governments that dare defy us, and we have used the spoils of this to maintain a welfare state that keeps people trapped at the bottom and to maintain a middle class who has been conditioned to see their blessings as an act of God or their own hard work and perseverance rather than what it is, which is often an extraction of value from other countries, which is unsustainable, which other countries are standing up to, and which will demand for us to create a new system. And we know that Janet Yellen and Joe Biden are quick to blame Russia for this situation. We know that this is not true. And my question is, why is it that we gave $40 billion in aid to Ukraine, but we're not helping the American people, right? And the reason for this is because in order to continue this imperialist system we've had from World War II, since World War II, Ukraine is a key geopolitical ally against Russia. And because we need to support Ukraine in order to continue doing things the way that we already did them, this is seen as an investment. War is seen as an investment. Keep that in mind. War is seen as an investment. To the leaders, it is not pointless. We can call it pointless, but if we call it pointless, we have to know how to advocate for a new system. And that is exactly what we do here at CPI. We understand that the only way to stop wars is to rebuild the American economy, and our 4-point program is designed to achieve exactly that. It is designed to achieve exactly that. And I want to point out that the extent of our support for Ukraine is not finite. It has not ended. And actually, this article from Sputnik talks about this. It says, U.S. military aid to Ukraine will only end with a, quote, real political revolution in America, according to a particular analyst here. Since the start of the Russian special military operation in Ukraine, the U.S. has supplied Kiev with unprecedented amounts of aid, chief among them being military. I think it's funny that you can call weapons aid, but here we are. Moscow has repeatedly stated that this will only prolong and aggravate the conflict, which, however, has not affected the ever-increasing scale of support for Ukrainian authorities. This Friday, Washington unveiled another $820 million package of security support for Ukraine, including 2 cutting-edge surface-to-air missile systems and 4 additional counter-artillery radars. I want to remind people that if these surface-to-air missile systems are used to shoot down, Russian planes, this is, again, blurring our red lines. This is bringing us very close to the brink of war. The Biden administration indicated the new package included extra ammo, for the high mobility artillery rocket systems that were already given to Ukraine, noting U.S. authorities almost weekly coordinate more and more new deliveries of arms and finances to Kiev counterparts amid pledges to give even more. And guys, Ukraine never stood a chance in this war. We're still giving them more and more and more and more because we are trying to invest in war, and it's not going to succeed. We are at another dead end, and continuing to dump our money into this hole while the American people suffer. All this takes place against the backdrop of an unprecedented inflation, etc., and there is no escape while the situation is going to get worse. Here we go. Daniel Lazare, U.S. investigative journalist, told Sputnik News that the Ukraine war is not going well. Russia is advancing steadily, and few more arms shipments are not going to make much of a difference. The economy is in serious trouble. The sanctions that were supposed to bring Russia to its knees are backfiring spectacularly, while Janet Yellen's scheme for putting a cap on Russian oil prices is being met with worldwide derision. According to the pundit, the whole foreign policy of the U.S. seems to be heading for another crisis, which prompted the journalist to ponder whether that really is, quote, par for the course. If confidence is plummeting, it's because no one thinks the Biden administration is the least bit competent. Now I'm going to push back against this idea that the Biden administration is simply incompetent and say instead that they are trying to continue a strategy which cannot be continued. They are trying to drive down a road and the road has ended. Okay? I don't attribute this to incompetence. If anything, their incompetence is intentional. They intentionally chose the least competent people in order to do this. All right. So, that is the extent of my news coverage for today. And I would love to cover more news. I think about 1 hour of news is about all that I can handle, at least in the present moment. But Ware says it's like a gambler doubling down in order to recoup their losses. I think that is a great way to describe it. So yeah, I think that is enough news for today. And I wanted to do something a little fun now to lighten things up. At least this is fun for me. So I made a new type of political compass, okay? And I want you to tell me what do you agree, do you disagree? What do you think of this compass, right? Now, normally I hate reductive diagrams because I just think it's like, how are you going to explain all of the complex factions and, all of these things that happen in politics? How the hell can you reduce this to a simple diagram? It doesn't make sense, right? But I also think that you can make something that plots it out and say, look, I'm not trying to reduce it. I'm just trying to make sense of things. I'm just trying to describe things. And this is how I see this. So we have the economic aspect, which is economic left and economic right. Economic left means that people are trying to establish a socialist mode of production. They're trying to organize the economy to serve public good rather than the profits of a wealthy few, as they would say. And on the right, we have the economic axis, which wants to basically either keep things as they are or make them worse. Either keep things as they are or make them worse. Then, in order to actually make sense of things, right? So the left and right aspect is purely economic. Now, in the original compass, they call it economic, but it doesn't actually make any sense, right? But the way I describe the economic axis here, it actually makes sense. And then there's the other axis, right, between hard and soft power. So this is not referring to military power versus media power. This is referring to whether or not you are dedicated to the establishment of power, basically. So on the top end, you're completely dedicated to the establishment of power. You don't care about morality. We don't care about anything, right? And you're going to put on a moral mask and say, oh no, I'm doing this because I care, because you want public support, because public support translates to power, right? So the top end is the people that are cynical, they're terrorists, they are fascists, they are people that are just willing to absolutely crush the opposition and win power no matter what, right? And then on the bottom, you have the soft end, right? These are people, they don't achieve anything. All they do is whine. They always feel like somebody is out to get them, and they always are just complaining and saying, I don't like this, I don't like that, right? But they never establish any power. All they do is serve to confuse the public and appeal to our moral sensibilities without achieving anything, right? So, here are historical figures who I have plotted out on this graph, okay? So let's go clockwise. On the top, we have Nietzsche, who believed in, power is kind of like the only thing, right? It's the... look, I haven't read Nietzsche, I'm going to admit it, but I understand his concept well enough because I have read about what he said. Anyway... It's like this raw will to power. It's like there's nothing to it substantively other than the will to power itself, right? And on the other end, I put Lao Tzu, who is a Chinese Taoist philosopher who believed that you should not try to exert your will on reality so much as just, allow things to be as they are and submit yourself, right? Submit yourself to the state of things and, just, do without doing, of course, taking action is part of the Taoist philosophy as well. But the context in which you take action is based on submitting yourself to these sort of conditions, right? Then on the right, we have Harry Truman, right? So Truman, he established the Truman Doctrine, right, in World War II, or after World War II. The Truman Doctrine is the doctrine that we've pretty much had since then. We no longer have a Soviet enemy, but we basically have replaced China and Russia. We replaced the role of the USSR with China and Russia in terms of thinking the same way that Truman thought. And Truman wanted to sort of make compromises and make deals. He didn't want to simply crush the Soviet Union like Hitler did. Hitler wanted to crush the Soviet Union. He also wanted to crush Europe. He also wanted to crush the capitalists, by the way. Now, that's the reason why America stepped in and why Britain stepped in to attack Hitler, because he started attacking Europe as well, right? But he's the hard right. He's not trying to make deals. He's trying to win power for Germany, pretty much, right? And then on the bottom end, we have Orwell. And this is the part of this chart that I think is more interesting, because in my view, the left, right, the fake left is actually the soft right. The fake left is the soft right. The people who spend most of their time talking about how the so-called left is not actually the left, right? These people are actually the right wing, and they constitute a form of reaction, and they claim that they're the true left, but they actually serve as a wedge to try to split people away from the real left. And the real left is socialist. The real left wants to establish socialism. While Orwell was not a fan of any existing socialism, he spent all of his time complaining about how they're not really socialist. He represents a reactionary right-wing force, but because he's so soft, I'm just critical of it. He's so soft, right? So he tricks you, because I'm soft, I'm actually on the left, right? He's tricking you. People say that being left-wing is about being soft, and it's about, always striving to be more idealistic. It's always about losing, pretty much. The left is about losing, right? And so I think that's a trick, right? Then on the left of the soft end, I put Robert Owen, who is an American utopian socialism, who actually established utopian communes and even laid out plans to establish such communes in Europe. And he pretty much said, look, we can just build socialism, right? But the ruling powers, they didn't want to. He made socialism. He made it happen to some extent. He made his communes. But he asked nicely, he said, look at how nice this is. Look at how efficient that this system is. Look at, socialism's great, isn't it? Like, don't you guys want to establish socialism? No, they don't. They don't want to establish socialism, right? So he's on the soft end of the left. I would put him there. Then on the hard end of the left, we have Trotsky, right? And Trotsky was very useful in the revolution. He was very useful to the Bolsheviks in their revolution, at least when he was. Sometimes he wasn't, right? And he wanted to basically bulldoze the world in order to establish socialism. He wanted to fight the capitalist countries as if the USSR could simply go into Europe and bulldoze all the governments and countries in order to establish socialism, right? So he's like the hard part of the left with that will to power, that strong will to power which he had, which is what made him useful during the Bolshevik Revolution, but also is why he was such a problem in many, many ways. Then we have Stalin in the middle, who, yes, he used power. Yes, he established power, but he did it on a real basis of trying to serve the people. And that is why he was so popular in Russia, why he is still popular in Russia today. Stalin represented a combination of having enough softness to care for the people and to work with people he disagreed with, and to do all this, yet having enough hardness to actually establish a successful Soviet government and to correctly analyze friends and enemies to figure out, who gets to stay and who is a problem, pretty much, right? So we need to be more like Stalin, right? Be more like Stalin, and be less like Trotsky, be less like Robert Owen. Find the middle ground. And then to put things in modern day, I have put some movements which are alive onto this chart. Right? So we have Joe Biden. He's on the center of the right. We have the Azov Battalion, right? They're for similar reason to Nazis. We have AOC, the Do Nothing, who is slightly less right-wing than Joe Biden. She's a social democrat. She says she's on the left. She's called far left, but really she's the moderate part of the right wing. And she does absolutely nothing. She's just there as a talking head. So she's completely soft. She has no guts. And she's just there as controlled opposition, right? So she represents the soft part of the right. Then on the soft part of the left, we actually have Pope Francis, right? And, you know, we don't have any Catholic theocratic states right now that Pope Francis is essentially providing guidance to, saying, hey, you know, this is how you guys should run your government because you're Catholic and I'm literally the Pope, you know, I'm speaking for the Catholic faith, right? And Pope Francis is critical of capitalism, right? He actually says things in support of Russia, and he wants peace. He wants peace. There's a lot of old people in the peace movement, actually, who kind of remind me of Pope Francis. They represent this left-wing force because they want peace, they want a socialist economy, but they simply aren't strong enough to fight to actually establish it, right? And then on the top left end, I put the Shining Path. And I put the Shining Path here. If you don't know, that is Peru. That's Chairman Gonzalo. These are these terrorist leftists in Peru who are fighting against neoliberalism. They're doing, you know, lots and lots of terrorism, right? But what happens is that they've lost this kind of humanity and this moderation that they should have. And they end up overstepping and losing the support of the broad masses of people of Peru. So I agree, kind of, maybe not entirely, but kind of with what Shining Path is fighting for, but the way in which they're fighting has lost that softness and humanity and moderation, which is necessary, right? And that is exactly what Xi Jinping has. Xi Jinping, he is not Pope Francis because he's running the Chinese state. He's running the Chinese state. He knows what needs to be done. He knows what corruption needs to be purged. He's working. He's achieving things, but he's not a brutal, inhumane guy. He represents the people of China. He's fighting for the people of China. And so he has that softness and care for the people about him, just like Stalin. And then in the middle here, I actually put Putin. I think that Putin represents the sort of center, actually, of global politics because he really just cares about what's best for Russia. He doesn't care, I have to be anti-capitalist or pro-capitalist. No, that's not what really matters to him, right? And so he's not fundamentally progressive left-wing force, but he's also not reactionary or right-wing at all, not like Joe Biden, not like his enemies in the Azov Battalion. No, he just wants the best for Russia. And he may actually be less left-wing than the people of Russia who have lived through the experience of the USSR, right? But Putin just tries to take what makes sense and tries to work with the conditions that he has to do the best that he can. So I think that Putin actually represents the most moderate and pragmatic force in politics today. All right. So that is my new political compass. And I wanted to read to you one last thing on stream today. I'm sorry if this content seems like maybe not continuous, but believe me, this is continuous with what I was talking about earlier with the exploitation of labor. And I think that it's important to study a variety of people. So actually, to close out the stream today, I wanted to read the first chapter, in my opinion, the only chapter worth reading, of Kropotkin's The Conquest of Bread. And this is something which describes the condition of the workers under capitalism in a very poetic and excellent way, which inspired me when I was younger, before I had read other writers. And I still think that it's an excellent thing for people to read today. And I think that this mentality really does kind of represent the view of labor, or the view that laborers who are educated should have. So, let's read it. The Conquest of Bread, Chapter 1, Our Riches. Part 1. The human race has traveled far since those bygone ages when men used to fashion their rude implements of flint and lives on the precarious spoils of the chase, leaving to their children for their only heritage a shelter beneath the rocks, some poor utensils, and nature, vast, ununderstood, and terrific, with whom they had to fight for their wretched existence. During the agitated times which have elapsed since, and which have lasted for many thousand years, mankind has nevertheless amassed untold treasures. It has cleared the land, dried the marshes, pierced the forests, made roads. It has been building, inventing, observing, and reasoning. It has created complex machinery, wrested her secrets from nature, and finally it has made a servant of steam. This was written at the time when steam power was the cutting edge. We've come a long way since then. Maybe this needs an update. And the result is that now the child of the civilized man finds ready at its birth to his hand an immense capital accumulated by those who have gone before him. And this capital enables him to acquire, merely by his own labor, combined with the labor of others, riches surpassing the dreams of the Orient expressed in the fairy tales of the 1001 Nights. We have access to riches beyond our imagination, beyond our dreams today. I mean, look, even though things are declining, look at how we live compared to how the man would have lived 200, 300 years ago, even 50, 60 years ago. We have come so far. We have come so far. The soil is cleared to a great extent, fit for the reception of the best seeds, ready to make a rich return for the skill and labor spent upon it. A return more than sufficient for all the wants of humanity. The methods of cultivation are known. On the wide prairies of America, each 100 men, with the aid of powerful machinery, can produce in a few months enough wheat to maintain 10,000 people for a whole year. We are way beyond that now, guys. Way beyond that now. And where man wishes to double his produce, to triple it, to multiply it 100-fold, he makes the soil, gives to each plant the requisite care, and thus obtains enormous returns. While the hunter of old had to scour 50 or 60 square miles to find food for his family, the civilized man supports his household with far less pains and far more certainty on a 1,000th part of that space. Climate is no longer an obstacle. When the sun fails, man replaces it by artificial heat. And we see the coming of a time when artificial light will also be used to stimulate vegetation. I think this is really interesting stuff. Kropotkin is advocating for a mass greenhouse system, which I don't think that that's actually going to happen. But it is interesting. It actually comes off as very oddly futuristic, considering this was written in, 1890 something? Anyway, by the use of glass and hot water pipes, man renders a given space 10 and 50 times more productive than it was in the natural state. The prodigies accomplished in industry are still more striking. With the cooperation of those intelligent beings, modern machines, themselves the fruit of 3 or 4 generations of inventors, mostly unknown, 100 men manufacture now the stuff to clothe 10,000 persons for a period of 2 years. In well-managed coal mines, the labor of 100 miners furnishes each year enough fuel to warm 10,000 families under an inclement sky. And we have lately witnessed twice the spectacle of a wonderful city springing up in a few months at Paris without interrupting in the slightest degree the regular work of the French nation. We are reading the chapter 1 of The Conquest of Bread, actually, by Kropotkin. And if in manufacturers, as in agriculture, and as indeed through our whole system, the labor, the discoveries, and the inventions of our ancestors profit chiefly the few, it is nonetheless certain that mankind in general, aided by the creatures of steel and iron which it already possesses, could already procure an existence of wealth and ease for every one of its members. Truly, we are rich, far richer than we think. Rich in what we already possess, richer still in the possibilities of production of our actual mechanical outfit. Richest of all in what we might win from our soil, from our manufacturers, from our science, from our technical knowledge, were they but applied to bringing about the well-being of all. I see some anime profile discourse. To be honest, I couldn't really give a crap about it. A lot of people like anime. Okay, well, I liked it when I was like in high school, but I don't really watch cartoons anymore, but okay, you do you. Anyway, part 2. We in civilized societies are rich. Why then are the many poor? Why this painful drudgery for the masses? Why, even to the best paid workman, this uncertainty for the morrow, in the midst of all the wealth inherited from the past, and in spite of the powerful means of production which could ensure comfort to all in return for a few hours of daily toil? Let me repeat this paragraph because I think that this is fire. This is fire. We in civilized societies are rich. Why then are the many poor? Why this painful drudgery for the masses? Keep in mind this was written in the 19th century. Why even to the best paid workman this uncertainty for the morrow, meaning not knowing what's coming tomorrow, in the midst of all the wealth inherited from the past and in spite of the powerful means of production which could ensure comfort to all in return for a few hours of daily toil? In the 19th century, Kropotkin was saying that we only need to work a few hours a day to support ourselves. He was saying this in the 19th century. The socialists have said it and repeated it unwearyingly. The socialists have said it and repeated it unwearyingly. Daily they reiterate it, demonstrating it by arguments taken from all the sciences. It is because all that is necessary for production, the land, the mines, the highways, machinery, food, shelter, education, knowledge, all have been seized by the few. In the course of that long story of robbery, enforced migration, and wars, of ignorance and oppression, which has been the life of the human race before it had learned to subdue the forces of nature. It is because, taking advantage of alleged rights acquired in the past, these few appropriate today 2/3 of the products of human labor and then squander them in the most stupid and shameful way. It is because, having reduced the masses to a point at which they have not the means of subsistence for a month or even for a week in advance, the few only allow the many to work on condition of themselves receiving the lion's share. The few only allow the many to work on conditions of themselves receiving the lion's share. You make the value, they take most of it from you. And that's the only condition under which capitalism allows us to labor. It is because these few prevent the remainder of man from producing the things they need, force them to produce not the necessities of life for all, but whatever offers the greatest profits to the monopolist. In this is the substance of all socialism. Take indeed a civilized country. The forests which once covered it have been cleared, the marshes drained, the climate improved, it has been made habitable. The soil which bore formerly only a coarse vegetation is covered today with rich harvests. The rock walls in the valleys are laid out in terraces and covered with vines bearing golden fruit. The wild plants, which yielded naught but acrid berries or uneatable roots, have been transformed by generations of culture into succulent vegetables or trees covered with delicious fruits. Thousands of highways and railroads furrow the earth and pierce the mountains. The shriek of the engine is heard in the wild gorges of the Alps, the Caucasus, and the Himalayas. The rivers have been made navigable. The coasts, carefully surveyed, are easy of access. Artificial harbors, laboriously dug out and protected against the fury of the sea, afford shelter to the ships. Deep shafts have been sunk in the rocks. Labyrinths of underground galleries have been dug out where coal may be raised or minerals extracted. At the crossings of the highways, great cities have sprung up, and within their borders all the treasures of industry, science, and art have been accumulated. Whole generations that have lived and died in misery, oppressed and ill-treated by their masters, and worn out by toil, have handed on this immense inheritance to our country. For thousands of years, millions of men have labored to clear the forests, to drain the marshes, and to open up highways by land and water. Every rood of soil we cultivate in Europe has been watered by the sweat of several races of men. Every acre had its story of enforced labor, of intolerable toil, of the people's suffering. Every mile of railway, every yard of tunnel has received its share of human blood. The shafts of the mines still bear on their rocky walls the marks made by the pick of the workmen who toiled to excavate them. The space between each prop in the underground galleries might be marked as a miner's grave, and who can tell what each of these graves has cost in tears, in privations, in unspeakable wretchedness to the family who depended on the scanty wage of the worker cut off in his prime by fire damp, rockfall, or flood. The cities, bound together by railroads and waterways, are organisms which have lived through centuries. Dig beneath them and you will find, one above another, the foundations of streets, of houses, of theaters, and of public buildings. Search into their history and you will see how the civilization of the town, its industries, its special characteristics have slowly grown and ripened through the cooperation of generations of its inhabitants before it could become what it is today. And even today, the value of each dwelling, factory, and warehouse, which has been created by the accumulated labor of the millions of workers, now dead and buried, is only maintained by the very presence and labor of legions of men who now inhabit that special corner of the globe. Each of the atoms composing what we call the wealth of nations owes its value to the fact that it is a part of the great whole. What would a London dockyard or a great Paris warehouse be if they were not situated in these great centers of international commerce? What would become of our mines, our factories, our workshops, and our railways without the immense quantities of merchandise transported every day by sea and by land? Millions of human beings have labored to create this civilization on which we pride ourselves today. Other millions scattered through the globe labor to maintain it. Without them would be nothing left in 50 years but ruins. There is not even a thought or an invention which is not common property born of the past and the present. Thousands of inventors, known and unknown, who have died in poverty, have cooperated in the invention of each of these machines which embody the genius of man. Thousands of writers, of poets, of scholars have labored to increase knowledge, to dissipate error, and to create that atmosphere of scientific thought without which the marvels of our century could never have appeared. And these thousands of philosophers, of poets, of scholars, of inventors, wow. See, that's capitalism coming into my mind. I'm thinking about investors instead of inventors. Anyway, of scholars, of inventors have themselves been supported by the labor of the past centuries. They have been upheld and nourished through life, both physically and mentally, by legions of workers and craftsmen of all sorts. They have drawn their motive force from the environment. The genius of a Seguin, a Meyer, a Grove has certainly done more to launch industry in new direction than all the capitalists in the world. But men of genius are themselves the children of industry as well as science. Not until thousands of steam engines had been working for years before all eyes, constantly transforming heat into dynamic force, and this force into sound, light, and electricity, could the insight of genius proclaim the mechanical origin and the unity of the physical forces. And if we, children of the 19th century, have at last grasped this idea, if we know how to apply it, it is again because daily experience has prepared the way. The thinkers of the 18th century saw and declared it, but the idea remained undeveloped because the 18th century had not grown up like ours, side by side with the steam engine. Imagine the decades that might have passed while we remained in ignorance of this law, which has revolutionized modern industry. Had Watt not found at Soho skilled workmen to embody his ideals in metal, bringing all the parts of his engine to perfection, so that steam, pent in a complete mechanism and rendered more docile than a horse, more manageable than water, became at last the very soul of modern industry. Even steam was completely unprecedented. Even steam was a massive, massive revolution. And now we have the contemporary gasoline engine, and we have electric vehicles at devices. Now, I mean, they had electricity then, but you know, it was not the same as it was now with batteries and all this. And it's really amazing to see how astounded they were in the 19th century by steam, and we've come even further. Unbelievable. Every machine has had the same history, a long record of sleepless nights and of poverty, of disillusions and of joys, of partial improvements discovered by several generations of nameless workers who have added to the original invention these little nothings, without which the most fertile idea would remain fruitless. More than that, every new invention is a synthesis, the result of innumerable inventions which have preceded it in the vast field of mechanics and industry. Science and industry, knowledge and application, discovery and practical realization leading to new discoveries, cunning of brain and of hand, toil of mind and muscle, all work together. Each discovery, each advance, each increase in the sum of human riches owes its being to the physical and mental travail of the past and present. By what right, then, can any one whatever appropriate the least morsel of this immense whole and say, "This is mine and not yours"? Workers built the world. Inventors built the world. And the capitalists own the world. That is what Kropotkin is saying. That is the truth that we are living in. That is the truth which can and will change. And we're seeing it happen already. I'm going to get some water and I'll be right back. It has come about, however, in the course of the ages traversed by the human race, that all that enables man to produce and to increase his power of production has been seized by the few. Sometime, perhaps, we will relate how this came to pass. For the present, let it suffice to state the fact and analyze its consequences. Today, the soil, which actually owes its value to the needs of an ever-increasing population, belongs to a minority who prevent the people from cultivating it or do not allow them to cultivate it according to modern methods. The mines, though they represent the labor of several generations and derive their sole value from the requirements of the industry of a nation and the clemency of the population, the mines also belong to the few, and these few restrict the output of coal or prevent it entirely if they find more profitable investments for their capital. Machinery, too, has become the exclusive property of the few, and even when a machine incontestably represents the improvements added to the original rough invention by 3 or 4 generations of workers, it nonetheless belongs to a few owners. And if the descendants of the very inventor who constructed the first machine for lace making a century ago were to present themselves today in a lace factory at Basse or at Nottingham and demand their rights, they would be told, "Hands off, this machine is not yours," and they would be shot down if they attempted to take possession of it. The railways, which would have been useless as so much old iron without the teeming population of Europe, its industry, its commerce, and its marts, belong to a few shareholders, ignorant perhaps of the whereabouts of the lines of rails which yield them revenues greater than those of medieval kings. And if the children of those who perished by thousands while excavating the railway cuttings and tunnels were to assemble one day, crowding in their rags and hunger, to demand bread from the shareholders, they would be met with bayonets and grape shot to disperse them and safeguard, quote, vested interests, unquote. In virtue of this monstrous system, the son of the worker, on entering life, finds no field which he may till, no machine which he may tend, no mine in which he may dig, without accepting to leave a great part of what he will produce to a master. He must sell his labor for a scant and uncertain wage. His father and his grandfather have toiled to drain this field, to build this mill, to perfect this machine. They gave the work the full measure of their strength, and what more could they give? But their heir comes into the world poorer than the lowest savage. If he obtains leave to till the fields, it is on condition of surrendering a quarter of the produce to his master, another quarter to the government and the middlemen. And this tax levied upon him by the state, the capitalist, the lord of the manor, and the middlemen is always increasing. It rarely leaves him the power to improve his system of culture. If he turns to industry, he is allowed to work, though not always even that, only on condition that he yield a half or 2/3 of the product to him whom the land recognizes as the owner of machine. So he's talking about how the peasants are being driven out of the little land that they own, that they till, right? And being driven instead to the factory where they are pretty much a peasant once again, except for displaced and relocated, working the machine. So we are like those peasants, we are like those workers, only that we are now, our minimum is higher than their minimum, but we still live at the minimum. We still have an inability to accumulate savings, which in times of crisis like now result in our savings being drained away. They result in us losing our savings. They result in us cutting back. They result in us going hungry when even in the 19th century, we had the resources to feed the entire world, and today that is even more true. We cry shame on the feudal baron who forbade the peasant to turn a clod of earth unless he surrendered to his lord a fourth of the crop. We call those the barbarous times. But if the forms have changed, the relations have remained the same, and the worker is forced under the name of free contract to accept feudal obligations. For, turn where he will, he can find no better conditions. Everything has become private property, and he must accept or die of hunger. The result of this state of things is that all of our production tends in a wrong direction. Enterprise takes no thought for the needs of the community. Its only aim is to increase the gains of the speculator. Hence the constant fluctuations of trade, the periodical industrial crises, each with which throws scores of thousands of workers into the streets. His analysis is a little lacking. I'm going to read Marx in future streams, who has a better analysis of these particular things. But the thing about Kropotkin is that he uses very poetic language, very stirring language, and I think that it's worth it to investigate what other people would have been saying at around the same time. The working people cannot purchase with their wages the wealth which they have produced, and industry seeks foreign markets among the moneyed classes of other nations. In the East, in Africa, everywhere in Egypt, Tonkin, or the Congo, the European is thus bound to promote the growth of serfdom, and so he does. But soon he finds everywhere similar competitors. All the nations evolve on the same lines, and wars, perpetual wars, break out for the right of precedence in the market. Wars for the possession of the East, wars for the empire of the sea, wars to impose duties on imports and to dictate conditions to neighboring states. Very, very familiar, right? This is America. He is describing America today. Wars against those blacks who revolt. I'm pretty sure he's not referring to blacks as in like America, I'm pretty sure he's talking about something else. Anyway, the roar of the cannon never ceases in the world, whose races are massacred. The states of Europe spend a third of their budgets in armaments, and we know how heavily these taxes fall on the workers. Ukraine. Okay? Ukraine. We're sending weapons to Ukraine. Our military budget in America, massive. It's over half of our budget. Europe, they spent a third, we spend half. We spend over half. Education still remains the privilege of a small minority, for it is idle to talk of education when the workman's child is forced at the age of 13 to go down into the mine or to keep his father on the farm. Well, we don't have child labor anymore. At least, right? At least. I would like to know a bit more history, because I'm pretty sure it is the socialists and the trade unionists who are responsible for the abolition of child labor. But I would like to know some more of that history. It is idle to talk of studies to the worker who comes home in the evening crushed by excessive toil with its brutalizing atmosphere. Now, I think this is interesting because back then they would have been working 12 or 14 hours, but even after an 8-hour day, it's hard to talk to workers, who feel crushed by excessive toil. So you can imagine it was much worse then, and it's still even a problem today. 8 hours would have been considered luxurious at that time, right? And I keep this in mind also because I, as a worker, am able to find energy because I believe in socialism, right? I work full time, but I believe in socialism. And I'm willing to put my effort towards it, and I'm lucky enough to be able to think about it and even at times read and write about it while I am at work. So I'm lucky enough to have that. And Jennifer says we do have child labor, immigrant labor, and that is true. That is true. America has regressed to the need for child labor and low-wage, undocumented immigrant labor in order to sustain our economy. We've gone back. Society is thus bound to remain divided into two hostile camps, and in such conditions, freedom is a vain word. The radical begins by demanding a greater extension of political rights, but he soon sees that the breath of liberty leads to the uplifting of the proletariat. Then he turns around, changes his opinions, and reverts to repressive legislation and government by the sword. He is describing fascism. Kropotkin is describing, right, fascism. Fascism manifested in these short upsurges of reaction against the proletariat and peasantry a long time ago. It has always been the reaction of capital. The fascist system is only when the reaction of capital becomes systemic. It is only, a fascist government is only when fascism is the only tool that the state has left. But Kropotkin is describing fascism in its early elementary form when it was the concentrated reaction of capital. A vast array of courts, judges, executioners, policemen, and gallowers, right? I don't know what that word means. I'm going to look it up because I'm curious. Jailers, right? Policemen and jailers is needed to uphold these privileges. And this array gives rise in its turn to a whole system of espionage, of false witness, of spies, of threats, and corruption. So you think judges are serving justice? Kropotkin knew better, right? We have to know better. A vast array of courts, judges, executioners, policemen, and jailers is needed to uphold these privileges. And this array gives rise in its turn to a whole system of espionage, NSA, anyone? Of false witness, not sure what that means, but of spies, of threats, and corruption. The deep state is nothing new, guys. It is nothing new. The system under which we live checks in its turn the growth of the social sentiment. We all know that without uprightness, without self-respect, without sympathy and mutual aid, humankind must perish. As perish the few races of animals living by rapine or the slave-keeping ants. But such ideas are not to the taste of the ruling classes, and they have elaborated a whole system of pseudoscience to teach the contrary. Pseudoscience. Capitalist science, liberal science, is pseudoscience. Fine sermons have been preached on the text that those who should share with those who have not. But he who would act out this principle is speedily informed that these beautiful sentiments are all very well in poetry, but not in practice. What do you have to give? I mean, our budgets are either balanced or sinking right now. So how, what do we actually have to even give to our fellow man? I mean, we can work, we can do charity, we could work at a soup kitchen, but what do you even have to give? We as workers collectively, we do not have enough to overcome our situation. We can only redistribute the profits that we can only redistribute everything but the profits which we have. We have everything but the profits, and we can only redistribute them to become more equally poor. That's all we can do. Giving false witnesses, false testimony, and perjury. That's interesting. That's very interesting. I think we've seen some trials recently around things that are related to the interests of capital. little tired. I can't think of anything right now, but I think we've seen that kind of thing happen lately. So, to lie is to degrade and besmirch oneself, we say, and yet all civilized life becomes one huge lie. People are living a lie. We accustom ourselves and our children to hypocrisy, to the practice of a double-faced morality. And since the brain is ill at ease among lies, mental illness, right? From the capitalist deception. Since the brain is ill at ease among lies, we cheat ourselves with sophistry. Hypocrisy and sophistry become the second nature of the civilized man. People are taught to be hypocrites. They are taught to be sophists, right? Sophistry being, basically, deceptive argumentation, right? So sophistry, meaning that we are taught to deceive ourselves and each other. We are taught to be hypocrites. This is the norm. This is the norm under capitalism. And Kropotkin is right. He is right. But a society cannot live thus. It must return to truth or cease to exist. Thus, the consequences which spring from the original act of monopoly spread through the whole of social life. Under pain of death, human societies are forced to return to first principles. The means of production being the collective work of humanity, the product should be the collective property of the race. Well, that's a little antiquated, but we know what he means. We agree with that mostly. Individual appropriation is neither just nor serviceable. All belongs to all. All things are for all men, since all men have need of them, since all men have worked in the measure of their strength to produce them, and since it is not possible to evaluate every one's part in the production of the world's wealth. All things are for all. Here is an immense stock of tools and implements. Here are all those iron slaves which we call machines, which saw and plane, spin and weave for us, unmaking and remaking, working up raw matter to produce the marvels of our time. But nobody has the right to seize a single one of these machines and say, "This is mine." If you want to use it, you must pay a tax on each of your products. Any more than the feudal lord or medieval times had the right to say to the peasant, "This hill, this meadow belong to me, and you must pay me a tax on every sheaf of corn you reap, on every rick you build." All is for all. If the man and the woman bear their fair share of work, they have a right to their fair share of all that is produced by all, and that share is enough to secure them well-being. No more such vague formulas as the right to work or to each the whole result of his labor, he says. What we proclaim is the right of well-being for all. Now, I don't 100% agree with Kropotkin. I think there are some blind spots in his analysis, right? I think that, he's against this idea to each the whole result of his labor. Well, you still have to manage the economy. You can't go straight to communism. Kropotkin is a utopian socialist. He calls it anarcho-communism. I call it utopian socialism. But just because he believes in something, which people have either forgotten or the Marxists are very critical of him, like Jennifer said, she's only ever seen people speak negatively about Kropotkin. Well, I think that that is, maybe there's a lot that you can criticize, right? But think of it this way. In participating in the discourse at the time, you may take a popular figure like Kropotkin in the same way that we would take a popular figure of our time, right? And criticize them, right? But if the critic then becomes the only part of the discourse that people remember, what happens? All the good right? All the things that made this person popular in the first place, they're forgotten. They're forgotten. And we fall to only seeing the cynical critique of the person, right? We know better than that. We know better than that. I mean, Lenin would find the smartest things that a given person would say, even if he disagrees with them. I think we should do the same. I think we have a lot to learn from popular voices, from popular figures. We should not surrender ourselves to cynicism and criticism and negativity, because then we have nothing with which to replace the capitalist system. You're critical of capitalism. You want things to be better. What do you replace it with, right? CPI, we say, we want a government of action to fight for working families, right? We want a system that is organized to serve public good rather than the profits of a wealthy few. That is what CPI says. And that is something very highly popular. And a lot of popular people are saying this in one way or another. Maybe a way that's a little bit less dry, a little bit more interesting. One of the things about Kropotkin that I thought was really interesting is how he talks about invention and the importance of intellectual property being collective. And right now, actually, private property extends to the domain of intellectual property and patents. And they say that this is something which causes more innovation because, oh, well, I can't simply use your technology. I've got to innovate my own, right? Well, that actually is deceptive, because when you can restrict who is able to use a given technology, you are limiting the development of technology. And we see this in a lot of spheres today. Actually, in the software world, most of our software that we use, like Microsoft Windows, for example, or Photoshop, is closed source, meaning that somebody who wants to add a feature to it, they are restricted from doing so, right? And we see a lot of open source hardware and software movements coming about now, where people are trying to replace this with something else. But the paid labor of closed source and closed off development, the profitable development of patents, right? And closed off mysterious things. You know, you buy something, you don't know what you're getting. You buy a radio, you no longer know how to repair it. Radio Shack's business, for example, used to be based on selling radios and then selling the parts to repair the radios when they inevitably broke. They were repairable, right? We don't have that anymore. We don't have that anymore. And his insistence on intellectual property, science, and invention, and this collective intellectual development of humanity, I think this is very important for us to think about. And I think it also has a very poetic property, because sure, physical labor itself may build things like dams and all this, but it also inevitably falls, I mean, we could build a canal and it's still there, but buildings decay and they're replaced and we build new buildings. But the intellectual aspect of it, right? This may develop over time, but seldom is it bulldozed wholesale. We still use the discoveries of these old scientists, mathematicians, and inventors today. And that persists to an even greater extent and operates in the domain of the mind, which is the domain of communication that we're in right now, right? So it lends itself to a lot of beautiful poetry, which is seen in Kropotkin's writing and his adoration for these inventors, these scientists, which he expresses. And I really think that a lot of people are stuck in a cynical mentality where they are so, you could say, worldly. They're so stuck in the state of things that they simply forget all of the riches of humanity which have come over the centuries. They forget about it. Maybe it's because we only see difference. I mean, when the light is on, things may seem bright, but we only see the dark from the light, right? we don't if some image is on a red background, for example, we're going to see the white as blue, because red complements cyan, actually, but red complements blue. So maybe we only see the difference. Maybe we only see that things are getting worse, but humanity has come such a long way. And somebody is messaging me right now here. Let's see. Okay, it's nothing. Anyway, guys, I just thought that this whole thing is very inspirational. I thought that even though we don't 100% agree with Kropotkin, we have so much to learn from him and so much to take from him, like many of these thinkers. And I really wanted to read that today. So with that, I've been streaming for a little over 2 hours. I'm very happy with how this stream has come out. And I just wanted to say thank you for attending this stream, and I hope to be able to do this on a regular schedule. Thursdays at 8:30 p.m. and Sundays at 8:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. That is GMT -6. And this right here is my Cash App. This is so that I can buy better equipment to stream with. And so if you donate to my Cash App, I will buy a better camera. I will buy better lighting. I will buy some miscellaneous things like a number pad that I can use for stream controls. I may buy a second screen so that I can reduce some of the awkwardness of transitions, And beyond that, I'm not gonna try to make a living off of this, at least not yet. I don't know if I build my audience. I think that I have a lot of potential to grow, and you guys can help me with that. If you like seeing my content, if you want me to have more time and dedication to producing content, then please share this stream around and consider donating me a little bit of money. And with that, I will end my stream. Oh, there's one other thing I wanted to say. If you like this stream content, if you want to support the organization CPI with their 4-point program to rebuild America, to save America from imperialism, if you want a government of action to fight for working families, consider joining CPI. That is cpiusa.org. So go check out CPI, consider joining CPI. And with that, I will end my stream. Thank you, everybody, for attending, and bye-bye.